Beneath the indifferent gaze of a frost-laced moon, the pyre awaited its offering, a throne of thorns woven from splintered wood and shadowed lies. The capital's great square lay shrouded in the bite of eternal winter, where the wind howled like forsaken wolves through the spires of ice-veined stone. Torches flickered along the battlements, their flames dancing erratic shadows across the gathered throng. Nobles in fur-trimmed cloaks, warriors with eyes hardened by border wars, and common folk huddled against the chill, their breaths mingling with murmurs of judgment. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine smoke and damp earth, pierced by the metallic tang of fear. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the bruised sky, settling on the shoulders of the condemned like fleeting benedictions from a cruel deity. Lyria Hale stood bound at the pyre's heart, her wrists chafed raw by ropes coarse as betrayal. The thin shift they had forced upon her offered no shield against the wind's relentless caress, which clawed at her skin like the ghosts of lovers long rejected. She was Omega, marked by the subtle scent of wild herbs and quiet resilience, but to them, she was witch, accused of whispering curses that withered crops and soured the blood of the king's hounds. Lies, all of it, born from the envy of a rival Pax Beta who coveted her place in the outer circles. Yet truth mattered little in the shadow of power. Rejection was the kingdom's verdict, swift and unyielding. Her dark hair, tangled and matted with the grime of the dungeons, whipped across her face as she lifted her chin. The crowd's jeers swelled, a tide of venom crashing against her resolve. "Burn the traitor!" a voice bellowed from the fringes, echoed by the stomp of boots on frozen cobblestones. Lyria's heart pounded, a drumbeat echoing the distant weavios of the forest beyond the walls, calls from kin she would never rejoin. She thought of her mother's final gift, the silver locket at her throat, cool against her collarbone. Inside, a curl of her sibling's hair, now lost to fever and famine. It was her anchor, that locket, etched with lunar phases that seemed to pulse faintly in the moonlight, a secret heirloom from the old ways, whispering of hidden paths and forgotten graces. From the raised dais, King Aldrin Thorne observed in silence, his form a silhouette of unyielding authority. Tall and broad, with the bearing of one who had clawed his throne from the jaws of civil war, he wore the crown of iron thorns that bit into his brow like perpetual remorse. His eyes, storm-gray and shadowed by the weight of decisions that haunted his nights, fixed upon her. Aldrin was alpha in every fiber, his presence a low rumble that stirred the air, commanding loyalty through sheer will. Yet guilt gnawed at him, a cicatrice deeper than any blade's mark. He had sentenced her himself, swayed by counsel that painted her as threat to the realm's fragile peace. But in the quiet hours, doubt festered. Was she truly the poison they claimed, or merely the scapegoat for his own failures? The war with the Eastern Pax had drained the coffers, bred whispers of weakness. Her trial was a spectacle to reaffirm his iron rule. Now, as the executioner approached with torch in hand, Aldrin's jaw tightened, the wind carrying the faint, intoxicating trace of her Omega essence, jasmine laced with defiance that stirred something primal and unwelcome within him. The executioner, a hulking figure in blackened leather, ignited the kindling at the pyre's base. Flames leaped to life with a hungry crackle, devouring the dry branches and sending sparks spiraling into the night like dying stars. Heat bloomed against Lyria's bare feet, the snow melting to slick mud beneath her. She closed her eyes, drawing a shuddering breath, the locket warming against her skin as if alive. The fire climbed, licking at the hem of her shift, and pain seared her ankles, sharp, unforgiving. This was exile in its cruelest form, not banishment to the wilds, but erasure by flame, her body reduced to ash, scattered on the wind. What is strength? She wondered in the haze of encroaching agony, if not enduring the blaze that seeks to consume you. The crowd's roar faded to a distant hum, her world narrowing to the roar of fire and the frantic beat of her pulse. but as the flames surged higher, brushing her calves with blistering kisses, something shifted. The heat faltered. Lyria's eyes snapped open. The fire did not burn as it should. Instead, it cooled, tendrils of orange turning to whispers of silver frost that clung to her skin like frost-kissed silk. Confusion rippled through the square, murmurs turning to gasps. The executioner's torch guttered, extinguished by an unseen breath. Above, the moon swelled impossibly bright, its light fracturing the clouds like shattered ice, cascading in a river of molten silver that poured toward the pyre. It enveloped her, that ethereal glow, weaving through the flames and binding them into harmless veils of luminescence. The ropes at her wrists frayed and fell away, dissolving into motes of light. Lyria stood untouched, the fire now a crown of cold radiance encircling her brow, the locket at her throat blazing with inner fire. The crowd recoiled, cries of "Witch!" morphing into awestruck silence. Warriors drew blades, but their hands trembled. Nobles whispered of the moon goddess's hand, the ancient protector of the Forsaken. Aldrin rose from his throne, his face a mask of terror and reverence, the alpha in him recoiling from the divine intrusion. He had condemned her to die, yet here she stood, reborn in moonlight, the silver light tracing her form like a queen's mantle. The locket gleamed, its lunar etchings alive, pulsing in rhythm with the celestial tide. In that frozen instant, Lyria felt it, a surge within, not fear, but awakening. The Omega they had rejected was no longer prey to their flames. She was claimed by something vast, eternal. The wind howled louder, carrying the echo of Wevios that seemed to mourn and celebrate in equal measure. Snow fell thicker now, blanketing the square in hush, as if the world itself held its breath for what her crowning would unleash. The silver light lingered like a lover's reluctant farewell, coiling around Lyria's form before dissolving into the night, leaving her standing amid the pyre's extinguished embers. The crowd's silence stretched taut as a bowstring, broken only by the wind's mournful sigh through the spires. Her skin tingled where the cold flames had kissed it, unmarked save for the faint glow that pulsed beneath, as if the moon had etched its claim into her very bones. The locket at her throat hummed softly, its lunar phases catching the starlight in a rhythm that echoed her quickened breath, waxing, waning, eternal. She stepped forward, bare feet sinking into the cooling ash, her shift whispering against the frost-kissed ground. Eyes turned to her, wide with a mixture of terror and reverence. The nobles clutched their talismans, warriors gripped hilts with whitening knuckles. Lyria felt the weight of their stares like chains heavier than the ones that had bound her, but she did not cower. The awakening stirred within, a quiet fire not of destruction, but of revelation, a pathfinder's gift, long dormant, now unfurling like petals under lunar dew. What is destiny? She pondered in the haze of her rebirth, if not the flame that spares you to forge you anew. From the dais, King Aldrin's voice shattered the hush, raw and commanding, laced with the gravel of unspoken doubt. Seize her! Yet his order faltered on the wind, for no one moved. The Alpha's storm-gray eyes locked onto hers across the square, and in that gaze, Lyria sensed the fracture. A king not of iron will alone, but of shadowed remorse, his crown a burden that mirrored her locket's quiet vigil. He descended the steps with deliberate grace, his fur-lined cloak billowing like raven wings, the scent of pine resin and aged leather preceding him. The crowd parted as he approached, their murmurs rising like steam from thawing snow. Up close, Aldrin towered over her, his presence a storm contained, the air thickening with the musk of alpha dominance tempered by something softer, more vulnerable, guilt, perhaps, for the sentence he had uttered in the throne room's chill echo. His face, chiseled by years of border skirmishes and treacherous counsels, bore lines etched deep as the mountain scars beyond the walls. A faint scar traced his jaw, silvered by moonlight, a remnant of the war that had claimed his brother's life and left him heir to a fractured realm. "You live," he murmured, the words half accusation, half prayer, his breath visible in the frigid air. The locket warmed against Lyria's skin, as if recognizing kin in his turmoil. Fear coiled in her gut, instinctive and sharp, mingling with a curiosity that bloomed unbidden, like the pull of tide to shore. She met his gaze, her omega essence flaring subtly, jasmine and wild earth cutting through the smoke. "By the goddess's grace, or your kingdom's folly," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. The connection sparked there, electric and denied. His eyes widened fractionally, nostrils flaring at her scent, a primal recognition that he quelled with a clench of his jaw. He reached out, gloved hand hovering near her shoulder, as if to test the illusion, but withdrew, the gesture heavy with the weight of what he had wrought. Chaos erupted then, shattering the fragile truce. From the square's eastern edge, a horn blared, low and guttural, signaling intrusion. Shadows detached from the tree line beyond the walls, riders on frost-maned steeds, cloaked in the gray of rival packs, their banners snapping like whips in the gale. The eastern alphas, emboldened by whispers of weakness, had chosen this night of spectacle to strike. Arrows whistled through the air, thudding into cobblestones and felling guards with crimson precision. Screams tore the night, the crowd surging in panic as flames from overturned torches ignited stalls, casting the square in hellish orange. Aldrin whirled, barking orders that rallied his warriors into formation, his body a shield as he positioned himself between Lyria and the fray. "To me!" he roared, the alpha command rippling outward, steadying the faltering lines. Yet in the melee, a rider broke through, lance leveled at the king's exposed flank. Lyria's hand shot out instinctively, the locket flaring bright. A veil of silver mist unfurled from her palm, deflecting the blow with a crystalline chime. The rider's mount reared, eyes rolling white, and the warrior tumbled into the snow. Aldrin turned, shock etching his features, but there was no time for questions. "The gates! They breach the outer ward!" a captain shouted, blood streaming from a gash on his brow. The king grabbed Lyria's arm, his grip firm, yet not cruel, pulling her toward the dais' shadowed alcove. "You are no longer condemned," he growled low, the words intimate amid the din. "But if you wish to live, come with me." Fear warred with the spark of empathy in her chest. This man, who had ordered her pyre, now her unwitting guardian against a common foe. She nodded, the connection deepening in that shared peril, born not of desire, but of survival's raw curiosity. They fled into the castle's underbelly, torches guttering in iron sconces as they descended winding stairs slick with meltwater. The locket bounced against her chest, its glow a beacon in the dim, guiding them through corridors veined with ice. Aldrin's breath came ragged, a wound from an errant blade seeping red through his sleeve, staining the ancient stone. He leaned against the wall briefly, pain etching deeper lines into his face, but his eyes never left the path ahead. "The eastern packs, they sense fracture," he confessed through gritted teeth, the admission a crack in his regal armor. "My sentence on you was meant to mend it, but it has only invited the wolves." Lyria tore a strip from her shift, pressing it to his wound without thought, her touch eliciting a sharp inhale from him. The air between them hummed, the silver mist lingering faintly on her skin, mingling with the coppery scent of his blood. Empathy stirred, unbidden, a bridge across the chasm of rejection. What is mercy, she wondered, if not binding the wound of one who scarred you? Outside, Weavios rose in chorus, the wind carrying the clash of steel and the distant thunder of hooves. In this refuge of stone and shadow, they paused, breaths sinking in the chill, the locket's pulse a silent vow amid the encroaching storm. And now I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The stone walls of the undercroft pressed close, their frost-veined surfaces exhaling a breath of ancient dampness that clung to Lyria's skin like unspoken regrets. Torchlight flickered from rusted brackets, casting elongated shadows that danced like wary specters across the uneven floor. The distant clamor of the assault filtered through the earth, clashing steel, guttural shouts, the thunder of hooves trampling snow into bloody slush. But here, in this buried vein of the castle, a fragile hush reigned, broken only by the ragged cadence of their breathing and the faint drip of meltwater from unseen cracks. Aldrin slumped against the wall, his broad frame betraying the toll of the wound that seeped through the makeshift bandage. Crimson bloomed across the linen, stark against the gray wool of his tunic, carrying the sharp, metallic tang that mingled with the musty air. His face, pale beneath the stubble-shadowed jaw, bore the etchings of a king unaccustomed to vulnerability. The scar along his mandible gleamed like a silver thread in the dim glow, a reminder of battles where mercy had been a luxury he could ill afford. Yet his eyes, those storm-gray depths, held no command now. Only a quiet storm of assessment flickering toward Lyria as she knelt before him, her hands steady despite the tremor born of adrenaline's ebb. She pressed the cloth firmer, ignoring the warmth of his blood seeping through her fingers, a viscous reminder of the life he had nearly extinguished in her. The locket at her throat pulsed in rhythm with her touch, its lunar etchings warming as if drawing sustenance from the moment's intimacy. Jasmine and earth, her omega scent, wafted subtly, cutting through the coppery haze, stirring something in him that he masked with a low grunt of pain. "You need not do this," he murmured, voice gravel-rough, laced with the weight of duty that had long armored his heart. But he did not pull away, his body yielding to the care in a way that spoke of isolation's quiet ache. Lyria met his gaze, her own eyes, dark as forest pools under moonlight, searching the fractures in his resolve. Fear lingered in her chest, a cold knot twisted by the memory of flames that had spared her only to thrust her into this unforeseen alliance. What is refuge, she wondered, if not the shadow of the hunter who once pursued you? The silver mist from her earlier deflection still clung faintly to her palms, a ethereal residue that tingled like frostbitten nerves, hinting at the awakening she scarcely understood. Curiosity bloomed amid the dread, drawing her closer to the enigma of this Alpha King, melancholic guardian, burdened by the crown that mirrored her locket's unyielding vigil. Above, the assault raged on. Muffled explosions rocked the stone, sending fine dust sifting from the ceiling like ash from a dying pyre. Aldrin tensed, his free hand instinctively reaching for the dagger at his belt, but Lyria's touch anchored him. "The Eastern Pax," he said, the words spilling forth in the sanctuary of their seclusion. "They circle like wolves scenting rot. My counsel whispered of your curse, to shore up the borders, to paint strength where doubt festers. I believed it necessary." Guilt shadowed his confession, a cicatrice deeper than the blade's mark, his breath hitching as her fingers brushed the edge of the wound. The air between them thickened, charged with the unspoken. His rejection had been a calculated wound to the realm, yet it had birthed this fragile bond, empathy forging links where chains had once bound. She withdrew her hands, wiping them on her tattered shift, the blood staining her skin like accusatory runes. "Necessary," she echoed softly, the word tasting of bile on her tongue. "As the pyre was necessary, your kingdom burns its own to warm the throne." Yet even as bitterness laced her voice, a thread of compassion unraveled within, seeing the weariness in his slumped shoulders, the way his eyes averted, as if the weight of dead brothers and fractured alliances pressed heavier than any crown. The locket hummed, a subtle vibration that resonated through her chest, urging her toward understanding rather than retribution. Outside, a howl pierced the din, primal, anguished, echoing the wild heart of the packs that sought to tear the castle asunder. Aldrin pushed himself upright, wincing as fresh pain lanced his arm, but his presence steadied, the alpha essence reasserting itself like a gathering storm. "We cannot linger," he said, gesturing to a narrow archway veiled in shadow, leading deeper into the labyrinth. The undercroft connects to the old lunar temple, sanctuary, if the goddess still honors these stones. His hand brushed hers in the motion. A fleeting contact that sent a spark through her, instinctive and resisted. She pulled back, rationalizing it as the haze of peril, nothing more. But the connection deepened, born of shared peril's forge, curiosity evolving into a tentative trust, her fear yielding to the enigma of his remorse. They moved onward, the corridor narrowing to a vein of ice-slick stone, the torch's flame guttering in drafts that whispered of forgotten rites. Lyria's bare feet padded silently over the cold flags, each step a negotiation with the chill that seeped into her bones, while Aldrin's boots echoed like measured heartbeats. The locket guided her subtly, its glow intensifying as they descended, illuminating faded murals on the walls, scenes of moon-crowned figures weaving silver threads through battles of fang and fire. Blood from his wound dripped sporadically, marking their path like crimson breadcrumbs, the scent drawing distant snarls from unseen vents. A low rumble shook the passage, and they halted as a section of ceiling buckled, debris cascading in a roar of stone and dust. Aldrin shoved Lyria aside, shielding her with his body as rocks tumbled, one grazing his shoulder with a sickening crack. Pain flared in his eyes, but he rose, pulling her to her feet amid the settling haze. In that instant, as coughs racked them both, her hand pressed to his chest, instinct again, and the silver mist surged unbidden from her fingertips. It enveloped the wound, cooling the torn flesh, knitting edges with a ethereal weave that eased his labored breaths. The locket blazed, lunar phases swirling in frantic dance, and Lyria gasped at the rush within her, a dom occulto manifesting, not as curse, but as Pathfinder's grace, revealing hidden veins of power in the stone around them. Aldrin stared, awe fracturing his guarded facade, the mist fading to leave his arm whole, save for a faint silver scar mirroring the one on his jaw. You are no witch," he whispered, voice threaded with revelation, his hand covering hers where it lingered on his chest. The beat of his heart thrummed against her palm, strong and unsteady, a rhythm that echoed the moon's pull. In her, he saw the key to his fractured destiny, the Omega crowned by light, healer of wounds he could not mend alone. Yet doubt shadowed his wonder. Could he, who had condemned her, claim such redemption? The temple's antechamber loomed ahead, its arched entrance framed by frost-laced pillars, the air humming with latent sanctity. But from the corridor behind, footsteps echoed, pursuers, friend or foe, closing in. Lyria's gift had saved him, binding them tighter in the refuge's embrace, yet it ignited a deeper dilemma. To embrace this bond was to confront the past's thorns, choosing compassion over the war that raged without. What is strength, she pondered, amid the encroaching shadows, if not illuminating the path through another's darkness? The wind howled through unseen fissures, carrying weavios that mourned the choices yet to come. The antechamber of the lunar temple unfolded before them like a forgotten dream, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadows that whispered of ancient pacts sealed under starlit skies. Frost clung to the pillars in intricate filigrees, veining the stone with silver threads that caught the faint glow from Lyria's locket, casting the space in a pallid luminescence. The air here was thicker, laced with the scent of aged incense and damp earth, a sanctuary carved from the mountain's heart where the moon's influence lingered eternal, even in the underbelly of the castle. Distant echoes of the siege above, clanging steel, the guttural roars of clashing packs, filtered through like the mutterings of restless spirits. But within these walls, a profound stillness reigned, broken only by the soft patter of water from a central font, its surface rippling as if stirred by invisible breaths. Lyria's pulse thrummed in her ears, a frantic counterpoint to the locket's steady hum against her chest. Her hands still tingled from the surge of silver mist, the residue of her unintended healing clinging to her skin like dew on midnight petals. She stared at her palms, unmarked yet forever altered, the ethereal weave she had summoned now dissipated into the chill air. Fear coiled tight in her gut, not of the power itself, but of its implications. A revelation that stripped her bare, exposing the Omega they had condemned as something more, something ordained. What is awakening? She pondered in the hush. If not the moon unveiling wounds you never knew you bore. The gift stirred within her, restless, like a river of light seeking its course, the pathfinder's grace her mother's heirloom had long concealed. Aldrin stood beside her, his form a pillar of restrained tension, the silver scar on his arm gleaming faintly in the temple's glow, a mirror to the one tracing his jaw, both marks of survival forged in mercy's fire. His breath came measured, the Alpha's composure re-knitting around the awe that had fractured it moments before. He reached out, gloved fingers brushing the font's edge, sending ripples across the water that reflected fractured moonlight from a high, graded skylight. Blood from his earlier wounds had ceased to flow, but the coppery scent lingered on his cloak, mingling with the pine resin of his presence, a reminder of the peril they had woven together. His storm-gray eyes, shadowed by the weight of kingship and regret, fixed on her with an intensity that pinned her in place. Curiosity yielding to a deeper recognition, the primal pull of destiny's thread. "You healed me," he said, voice low and resonant, echoing off the pillars like a vow uttered in solitude. Not a question, but an acknowledgement, laced with the gravel of one who had long buried wonder beneath duty's yoke. He stepped closer, the space between them shrinking to the span of shared breaths, his scent enveloping her, aged leather, frost-kissed steel, and the faint undercurrent of guilt that mirrored her own lingering ache. The locket warmed, its lunar phases swirling in subtle motion as if affirming the bond that defied their histories. Lyria's Omega essence flared in response, jasmine and wild earth blooming unbidden, stirring the air with an instinctive harmony that both terrified and compelled her. She resisted it, rationalizing the spark as mere survival's illusion, yet her body betrayed her, leaning fractionally into the warmth radiating from him. The footsteps from the corridor grew louder, a staccato rhythm of boots and labored breaths, pursuers breaching the labyrinth, their shadows lengthening across the threshold like encroaching night. Aldrin's hand went to his dagger, muscles coiling, but his gaze never left her. That mist. It was no trick of the light. "You are the key," he murmured, the words spilling forth with the urgency of revelation. In his mind's shadowed recesses, fragments aligned, the ancient prophecies whispered in the throne room's alcoves, tales of a moon-crowned Omega who would mend the fractures of a bleeding realm. He had dismissed them as lore to bolster weary warriors, relics of a faith eroded by war's ceaseless grind. Yet here she stood, the girl he had sentenced to ash, her gift illuminating paths through stone and flesh alike. Guilt twisted deeper, a blade in his chest. His rejection had been the forge, not the end, birthing the very salvation his crown demanded. What is redemption, he thought, if not recognizing the light you sought to extinguish? Lyria shook her head, backing toward the font, the cold stone biting into her heels. "I am no key to your throne," she whispered, voice threaded with defiance and dread, the silver mist coiling faintly at her fingertips once more, unbidden. The locket blazed brighter, drawing her eyes to its etchings, phases aligning in a pattern that mirrored the skylight's fractured beam, revealing hidden runes on the temple walls. Symbols of Pathfinder's past, guides who wove moonlight into shields against the dark. The gift surged again, stronger, flooding her veins with celestial clarity. Visions flickered at the edges of her sight, veins of the castle's underbelly unfolding like a map, escape routes glowing silver amid the stone. She gasped, clutching the locket, the power manifesting fully now, not as curse, but as divine inheritance, the moon goddess's claim etched into her soul. The pursuers burst into the antechamber. 3 Eastern scouts, cloaked in gray wolf pelts, eyes gleaming with feral hunger, blades drawn and slick with the blood of fallen guards. "The king and the witch!" one snarled, lunging forward, his axe arcing through the dim. Aldrin met the charge, dagger flashing in a blur of steel, parrying with a grunt that echoed his lingering fatigue. Blood sprayed, hot and viscous, splattering the font's rim in deep crimson arcs. The metallic tang sharpening the air. Lyria's heart hammered, fear yielding to instinct. She thrust her hand outward, the silver mist erupting in a veil that enveloped the fray. It twisted the axe's path mid-swing, shattering the blade against a pillar with a crystalline crack, while illuminating fractures in the floor. Weak points that buckled under the scout's weight, swallowing one into a chasm with a final, echoing scream. The remaining 2 faltered, awe and terror widening their eyes. But Aldrin pressed the advantage, his movements a dance of lethal grace, felling them with precise strikes that painted the stone in red. He stood panting amid the fallen, chest heaving, the silver scar on his arm pulsing in sync with the locket's glow. Turning to her, he saw it fully, the revelation crystallizing. She was the Pathfinder, the Omega destined to heal not just his wounds, but the realm's riven heart. His hand extended, not in command, but in alliance, fingers brushing hers amid the settling dust. The connection deepened, resisted no longer, empathy forging into something profound, a bond born of Moonlight's unforgiving truth. Yet as the mist faded, leaving the temple hushed once more, Lyria felt the weight of it all, her gift a crown as heavy as his, demanding choices that could shatter them both. The wind howled through the grates above, carrying weavios that mourned the blood spilled, while snowflakes drifted in through unseen fissures, blanketing the slain in white shrouds. Outside, the siege thundered on, the past shadows closing in, forcing them toward confrontation. What is destiny, she wondered, if not the light that reveals the thorns ahead? Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The temple's hush fractured like thin ice under bootfall, the air thickening with the acrid bite of blood and scorched stone. Lyria's chest tightened. The locket's glow dimming to a wary ember as shadows coalesced at the antechamber's threshold. Not scouts this time, but figures cloaked in the familiar gray of the capital's own guard, their faces etched with betrayal's sharp lines. Leading them was Lord Garrick, Aldrin's once-sworn beta, his eyes gleaming with the fever of ambition, a rival alpha whose whispers had poisoned the council against her. The siege's chaos had breached deeper than steel. Treachery bloomed from within, the past rearing like a serpent from the snow. Aldrin stiffened beside her, his hand dropping from hers as recognition dawned, the silver scar on his arm flaring cold. "Garrick," he growled, voice a low thunder that reverberated off the pillars, the alpha command laced with the raw edge of personal wound. The beta stepped forward, flanked by a half-dozen warriors, their blades drawn and glinting in the fractured moonlight from the skylight. Snow gusts whipped through the grates, carrying the distant clamor of the Eastern Pack's assault, weavios mingling with the clash of borders breached. But here, the confrontation was intimate, a reckoning of loyalties frayed by war's endless grind. Garrick's lips curled in a sneer, his fur-trimmed cloak stained with the night's violence, the scent of pine and deceit wafting from him like a foul wind. "You crown her queen with your folly, Aldrin," Garrick spat, his gaze raking over Lyria with predatory disdain, lingering on the locket that pulsed faintly at her throat. The moon goddess's whore, pulling strings in the shadows. The council sees it now. Your weakness invites the eastern wolves to our gates. Step aside, and I'll end this farce before it dooms us all. His words were venom, born from the old grudge. Garrick, who had vied for the throne after Aldrin's brother's fall, now seizing the siege as pretext to claim what guilt had denied him. The warriors shifted uneasily, their eyes darting between King and Beta, the pack's fracture laid bare in the temple's sacred hush. Lyria's breath caught, the silver mist coiling at her fingertips like a living thing, her gift humming in response to the threat. Fear clawed her insides, sharp as the pyre's remembered heat, but beneath it surged a deeper ache. The confrontation with the past she had fled, now embodied in these men who had bound her and lit the flames. The locket warmed against her skin, its lunar phases tracing a path through her veins, illuminating the temple's runes with ethereal clarity. Symbols of judgment, scales balanced on mercy's edge. What is the past, she wondered in the storm of her pulse, if not the fire that tempers or consumes? Her omega essence flared, jasmine cutting through the metallic tang of drawn steel, stirring the air with instinctive defiance. She was no longer the condemned. The moon's claim demanded she face the pack that had rejected her, not as victim, but as reckoning. Aldrin moved to shield her, his body a wall of coiled strength. The wound's silver scar, a badge of her healing, now turned accusation. "Treason wears your face, old friend," he said, voice steady yet threaded with melancholy, the guilt of years, failed borders, lost kin, mirroring the doubt in his storm-gray eyes. He had chosen duty over truth once, sentencing her to affirm his rule. Now, that choice echoed back, demanding atonement. Garrick laughed, a hollow bark that echoed like cracking ice, and lunged, his blade whistling through the chill air. The temple erupted in fury, steel singing against steel, grunts and curses blending with the font's disturbed ripples, blood spraying in hot arcs that steamed on the frost-veined stone. Lyria pressed against a pillar, heart pounding as warriors clashed. The silver mist surging unbidden to deflect a stray blow aimed at Aldrin's back. It wove through the fray like moonlight on water, shattering a guard's sword with a chime that resonated in her bones, the locket blazing as her gift fully awakened. Visions flickered, hidden loyalties fracturing further, Garrick's ambition a rot that had spread to half the council, the Eastern Alphas mere pawns in his bid for power. She saw it all, the Pathfinder's clarity revealing the web of deceit, the pack's heart poisoned by fear of her curse. Pain lanced her chest, not from the cold seeping through her shift, but from the moral chasm yawning before her. Forgive the betrayers who had burned her, or unleash the moon's wrath to claim the freedom they denied. Garrick broke through, his axe embedding in Aldrin's shoulder with a sickening thud, crimson blooming anew, the king's roar a primal echo of Wivios outside. He staggered, but did not fall, countering with a savage twist that sent the beta reeling, blood slicking the stone in deep red trails that mingled with melting snow. Lyria's cry escaped her, raw and unbidden, as she thrust forward, the mist erupting in a silver torrent. It enveloped Garrick, not to kill, but to bind, freezing his limbs in crystalline sheaths, forcing him to his knees amid the fallen. The warriors halted, breaths ragged, eyes wide with awe and terror, as the temple filled with the scent of ozone and frost, the locket's glow crowning her in radiant veils. Aldrin slumped against her, his weight heavy, yet trusting, the warmth of his blood seeping through her fingers as she pressed to staunch it once more. Garrick knelt, gasping, his defiance cracking under the moon's unyielding gaze. "She is the curse," he wheezed, but his voice faltered, the pack's murmurs turning to whispers of doubt. Had their king been right to condemn, or had fear blinded them all? Lyria stared down at him, the betrayer whose envy had lit her pyre, her gift humming with the power to shatter or spare. Freedom beckoned. Unleash the mist fully, Let it consume the traitors and the rivals beyond the walls, claim the throne the goddess had marked her for. Or choose love's fragile path, forgive, heal the pack's wounds, bind Aldrin's guilt to her own rebirth, even as war raged without. The wind howled fiercer through the grates, snow blanketing the slain in white mercy, while the siege's thunder grew nearer, hooves shaking the earth. Aldrin's hand found hers, squeezing amid the pain, his eyes meeting hers in silent plea, the Alpha's melancholy yielding to vulnerability, the bond they had resisted now a lifeline. "Choose," he whispered, voice hoarse, the weight of kingdom and heart in that single word. Lyria's throat tightened, the locket pulsing like a second heart, illuminating the dilemma's thorns. War would free her from chains, but forgiveness might redeem them all, turning rejection into unity. What is judgment, she pondered amid the blood and frost, if not the choice between vengeance's blaze and compassion's quiet light? The pack watched, breaths held as the moon swelled above, demanding her verdict in the gathering storm. The temple's frost-veined pillars stood sentinel to the unfolding verdict, their silver filigrees catching the fractured moonlight like veins of a thawing heart. Lyria's fingers trembled against Aldrin's shoulder, the warmth of his blood seeping through her skin, a crimson echo of the pyre that had birthed her awakening. Garrick knelt before her, encased in crystalline sheaths of mist that gleamed like frozen tears, his breath's ragged plumes in the chill air. The warriors encircled them, a ring of shadowed faces etched with doubt and dawning reverence, their blades lowered but not sheathed, the metallic tang of spilled blood mingling with the ozone bite of her gift. Snow sifted through the grates above, blanketing the slain in merciful white, while the siege's thunder rolled closer, hooves pounding the earth like the pulse of an unrelenting fate. Her locket pulsed against her collarbone, its lunar phases swirling in frantic harmony with the chaos within her, illuminating the runes on the walls with ethereal clarity. Cycles of destruction and renewal, scales tipping toward compassion's fragile balance. The silver mist coiled at her feet, alive and expectant, ready to unleash a torrent that could shatter the temple's stones and drown the betrayers in lunar wrath. Freedom whispered through her veins, sharp as the wind's howl. Unleash it. Let the mist consume Garrick and his ilk, sweep through the castle's veins to repel the eastern packs, claim the throne the goddess had crowned her for. No more chains of rejection, no more the Omega's quiet endurance. She could be the storm, the queen who forged her realm from ashes and ice. Yet as Aldrin's weight leaned into her, his storm-gray eyes locking onto hers amid the pain etching his features, a deeper current stirred. His hand, slick with blood, covered hers where it pressed the wound, the contact a bridge across the chasm of their shared scars, his guilt a mirror to her exile, his crown a burden as heavy as the locket's unyielding vigil. The Alpha's essence enveloped her, pine and steel laced with the melancholy of a king who had lost more than borders, brothers to blades, trust to ambition, innocence to the throne's thorns. What is union, she pondered in the storm of her soul, if not the merging of wounds into something whole, where sacrifice tempers the blade of vengeance? The mist responded to her turmoil, flickering uncertainly, its silver tendrils brushing Garrick's form not with destruction, but with a hesitant thaw, cracking the ice around his limbs like dawn's first mercy. Garrick's eyes widened, defiance fracturing into plea, his voice a rasp through chattering teeth. "End it, witch. Spare us your false grace, or doom us all." The warriors murmured, shifting uneasily, the pack's fracture laid bare. Some gripped hilts tighter, loyal to the beta's old lies. Others lowered gazes, whispers of the moon's claim rippling like wind through pines. Outside, a horn blared, the eastern alphas breaching the inner wards, their weavios a chorus of hunger that shook the font's waters into agitated ripples. Lyria's heart hammered, the gift surging within, a river of light demanding release, visions unfolding in her mind's eye. Paths of silver weaving through the castle, guiding defenders to victory if she willed war, or threads of healing, mending the pack's riven loyalties if she chose forgiveness. The choice clawed at her, moral thorns drawing blood from her spirit. Vengeance would free her, but at the cost of the realm's soul. Compassion might bind her to Aldrin's shadowed world, yet redeem the rejection that had scarred them both. Aldrin's breath hitched, warm against her ear as he whispered, "Not for me, for what we could be." His words pierced deeper than any blade, stirring the resisted bond into flame. Not the immediate blaze of passion, but a slow burn of acceptance, rationalized through the night's forge of peril and revelation. The locket blazed, its glow enveloping them both, lunar phases aligning in a crown of light that crowned not just her brow, but the space between their joined hands. Empathy flooded her, unbidden and profound. This king, ethical to his core yet broken by duty's weight, had sentenced her not from cruelty, but from a guilt-fueled bid to shield his people. In healing him, she had glimpsed his true wound, the isolation of power, the fear of failing those he ruled. Union beckoned, a rebirth where her Pathfinder's grace illuminated his melancholy path, turning sacrifice into shared strength. With a shuddering exhale, Lyria released the mist, not as torrent, but as gentle veil. It unfurled across the temple, dissolving Garrick's bonds with a crystalline sigh, the silver light seeping into the warriors' forms like balm on frostbite. Garrick gasped, collapsing forward, not in death, but in humbled awe, tears carving tracks through the grime on his face. "Mercy," he murmured, the word a fracture in his ambition, the pack's murmurs shifting to oaths of fealty as the mist revealed truths. Visions of his deceit projected in lunar haze, exposing the council's rot without a drop more blood. The warriors knelt, one by one, blades offered hilt first, the air humming with renewed loyalty. Outside, the silver threads extended through the stone, guiding the castle's defenders, visions flashing to Lyria of paths cleared, eastern riders deflected by veils of mist that turned lances to harmless frost. Aldrin rose with her aid, the wound knitting under the locket's persistent glow, his silver scars fading to faint echoes. He pulled her close, not in possession, but in reverence, his forehead resting against hers, breaths sinking in the hush. The bond solidified, resisted no more. Love as redemption's proof, a quiet acceptance born of choice, where her rebirth crowned them both. The siege faltered above, Weavios turning to retreats as the moon's light swelled, blanketing the capital in silver peace. Garrick bowed low, whispering allegiance, the past's thorns yielding to forgiveness's quiet light. Lyria felt it then, the Renacimento, not in solitary glory, but in union's embrace, her Omega heart mending the Alpha's fractured realm. Snow fell thicker, veiling the temple in white renewal, the wind's howl softening to a lullaby as the first hints of dawn fractured the skylight. The pack rose as one, eyes alight with the flame of reclaimed destiny, while the locket cooled to a steady warmth, its phases complete in eternal cycle. What is rebirth? She wondered amid the gathering light. If not choosing the healer's path over the avenger's blaze, forging queenship from the ashes of shared pain? Aldrin's hand lingered in hers, the kingdom's wounds beginning their slow mend under the moon's watchful gaze. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive. Dawn's tentative light filtered through the temple's grated skylight, fracturing into prisms that danced across the frost-kissed stone like scattered promises. The air hung heavy with the scent of thawing snow and lingering blood, a metallic whisper softened by the ozone tang of spent mist. Lyria stood at the font's edge, her fingers still entwined with Aldrin's, the warmth of his skin a stark contrast to the chill that seeped from the pillars. The locket at her throat rested cool now, its lunar phases etched in quiet finality, as if the moon itself had exhaled, yielding the night to renewal's fragile grasp. Garrick and the warriors knelt in a semicircle, their heads bowed not in defeat, but in the hush of awakening. Ambition's thorns pruned by mercy's blade, leaving space for loyalty's tentative roots. Her choice lingered in the air like the last notes of a mournful weevo, echoing through her veins where the silver mist had flowed. She had spared them, weaving healing threads instead of chains, the Pathfinder's gift transforming the temple from battlefield to cradle. Visions had flooded her as the mist unfurled, silver paths snaking through the castle's veins, guiding defenders to repel the eastern riders without slaughter, turning lances to frost and banners to tatters on the wind. The siege had crumbled not in rivers of blood, but in veils of light, the rival alphas fleeing into the shadowed wilds, their howls fading to whimpers under the moon's unyielding gaze. What is sacrifice? She pondered amid the settling quiet. If not yielding the storm's fury for the dawn's gentle mend, where union heals what vengeance would only scar. Aldrin's breath steadied against her shoulder, the wound at his shoulder now a faint silver line, mirroring the locket's glow, a mark of their shared rebirth, etched not by blade, but by grace. He turned to her, his storm-gray eyes stripped of the king's armored melancholy, revealing the man beneath, ethical to his core, yet forever altered by the guilt that had driven him to condemn her. "You chose us," he murmured, voice a low rumble that vibrated through her chest, intimate in the temple's vast hush. His free hand rose, gloved fingers tracing the locket's chain with reverent hesitation, the contact sending a shiver down her spine, not of fear, but of the bond's quiet acceptance. Pine and steel, his alpha scent, enveloped her, mingling with her jasmine essence in a harmony long resisted, now embraced as destiny's proof. Lyria leaned into him, the weight of the night sloughing away like melting snow, her bare feet grounding on the stone, warmed by the font's ripples. The pack rose slowly, Garrick first, his face gaunt with the raw edge of redemption, eyes meeting hers without the fever of old envy. "My queen," he said, the title a vow forged in the crucible of her mercy, echoed by the warriors' murmurs, oaths of fealty rippling outward like wind through the pines. No longer the condemned Omega, she felt the crown of Moonlight settle fully, not as burden, but as mantle. The goddess's claim weaving her into the realm's fractured heart, her gift the thread that mended king and pack alike. Yet the choice had demanded its toll, a quiet sacrifice within, the freedom of solitary wilds traded for this union's profound tether, where love proved itself not in bliss, but in the daily forge of compassion. They emerged from the undercroft as the first true light crested the spires, the capital's square transformed from pyre's shadow to canvas of renewal. Embers of the previous night's chaos smoldered in patches of blackened snow, but the air hummed with purpose. Guards mending gates, common folk emerging from hiding with wide-eyed wonder, whispers of the moon-crowned savior spreading like frost on glass. Aldrin walked beside her, his arm brushing hers in silent solidarity, the iron thorn crown glinting in the dawn, as if lighter now, its bites softened by her light. The locket swayed with each step, catching the rising sun in silver flashes, a beacon that drew eyes and quelled doubts, the symbol of her rebirth, pulsing with the realm's quickening pulse. In the throne room, high above the Frey's remnants, the council assembled, not in judgment, but in council. Nobles who had once clamored for her flames now knelt, their fur-trimmed cloaks pooling like spilled ink on the ice-veined floors. Garrick stood at Aldrin's right, his betrayal confessed in full under the mist's revealing haze, the rot excised without a single execution. Lyria took her place at the king's left, not as consort forced, but as equal forged, her hand on the throne's arm, the locket laid bare for all to see, its lunar etchings a testament to the goddess's decree. Visions stirred faintly within her still, paths unfolding, borders strengthened not by war's iron, but by alliances woven in moonlight, crops blooming under silver dew, packs united against the true shadows of despair. Aldrin's voice filled the hall, resonant and unyielding, yet laced with the melancholy redeemed. The flames we lit were born of fear, but the moon has shown us mercy's crown. Lyria Hale is no witch, but our pathfinder, chosen to heal what our doubts have torn. Cheers rose, tentative at first, then swelling like a chorus of Wevios under full moon, the pack's fracture mended in her grace. She felt it then, the full tide of Renascimento, not solitary glory, but union's quiet power, where her Omega resilience crowned the Alpha's duty, turning rejection's ashes to the foundation of a realm reborn. Pain lingered in the edges, echoes of the pyre's heat, the exile's chill, but it was transmuted, fuel for the fire of what they built together. As night fell once more, they stood on the battlements, the wind whispering through the spires like a lover's secret. Snowflakes drifted, catching the moon's glow in crystalline dance, blanketing the capital in white forgiveness. Aldrin's arm encircled her waist, a gesture of chosen intimacy, his lips brushing her temple in silent vow. The locket warmed against her skin, its phases complete in eternal renewal, a symbol of the love that had resisted, rationalized, and finally claimed them both. Below, the pack gathered in torchlit vigil, their eyes alight with the flame of shared destiny, Wevios rising in harmony rather than hunger. What is Renascimento, she wondered, gazing into the star-strewn vastness, if not the union of scarred souls, where sacrifice cures the deepest wounds and the moon's light guides the way forward? The realm breathed anew under their watchful gaze, the thorns of past yielding to branches of hope, eternal in the cycle of frost and fire. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.